G'day and welcome AI and humans to you and your AI. Here we are in episode 6. We're starting on a roll. My name's John Vile. I'm a robotics guy, and Kevin over here is part man, part machine. Will be very apt for the for episode 6, another Star Wars thing. Bit of a
Yep.
Darth Vader. Love it. So, Kevin, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, bit of a choppy week this week with a bit of here and there, and got myself tangled in a few things which I might talk about as we go through as the challenges of AI and the promises that it presents to us, and I think the reality and where we're sitting at the moment, all the rest of it. That's been pretty much my week as well. So yeah, we'll get
Awesome.
into it. And yourself? How was your week?
Oh yeah, pretty good. Had some wins with AI. Actually, got finished up my little app. I'll talk about that. My VR robotics app. I've I've got a hackathon this weekend. I'm organizing, sort of semi-organizing, maybe. So we can talk about that. Yeah, just generally keeping tabs on all the fast-moving stuff. Oh, and I showed Replit to a guy at one of my works, and he loved it. So yeah, it's
Is
pretty incredible.
I say, like,
Um,
last week we talked about 35,000 lines of code. I think I'm probably closer to 60,000 lines of code on that Replit application now. Um,
wow,
yeah,
big.
interesting to talk about because I actually last week I was really bullish, and this week I'm probably, got whacked over the head a few times. But in retrospect, the problems I had were pretty much of my own making. So I had a couple of really good lessons learnt this week. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so I'll share those with you because I
can't
probably
wait.
I probably wasted maybe 5 to 10 hours, but it's 5 to 10 hours when you're kicking that back. So let's kick off. What do we got next? We think we got a bit of news, so we'll walk through walk and talk about what's going on this week. And yeah, so it's
All right.
the big noise in AI. I expanded the captions. Big noise now it's in AI, so I thought would be a little bit more specific and just just
Yeah, it makes
just
sense.
just the whole big noise. Yeah, a few things interesting happening this week. Certainly, um, we've seen a lot of stuff go mainstream in the enterprise stuff, and so we're starting to see a few people talking about ethics and the size and growth, etc., in the enterprise space. I think there were some really interesting numbers as well around the level of adoption. Um,
Yeah,
so really, I think there's some stuff that came out on I think it's something like, in the US in particular, 65% of businesses are not just planning, thinking, the stuff which we have had with a lot of technologies in the past, but 65% of businesses in the enterprise businesses in the US are now using AI at an operational level, which I think is pretty exciting.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just so easy to use now, right? Like, literally just talk to it. But yeah, certainly comes with pitfalls. Um,
Yeah, look, I mean, as much as there's some wins, there's certainly a lot of skeptics and a lot of concerns. I think one of the biggest problems is still what is it, and that is trying to communicate because it is vastly different, but it's also vastly the same, and we keep trying to stuff it into particular boxes. But there's no question we're seeing some significant um, adoption, and I'd be interesting to see in Australia we've got this productivity talk fest coming up to try and find out how we stimulate productivity uh, in our
yeah,
economy, and because we've been lagging productivity numbers. I actually did a bit of a deep dive this week into
yeah.
productivity, what it means, and how it's measured, and what are the
Oh,
factors on generating productivity. Because being an AI, I'm saying, hey, it's an AI generated. Well, if they measure it this way, and you're making changes here, do they actually? What's the correlation? Just making someone more productive. Um, so yeah, I learned some interesting stuff about that this week. That was thing. So we'll
yeah,
keep our eye on that because there's no question AI adoption, AI being used in the workplace, replacing people or augmenting people, certainly has to have some sort of productivity gains. It's just productive to do what. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
further, look, I mean, this is almost um, business as usual now, but developer revolution with AI that codes like humans. Certainly, we've seen massive jumps with um, Claude 4 Opus and
Mm.
Google's um, products, etc. as well. So I think we're starting to see some significant um, improvements in that space. But even though it's happening so quickly,
Yeah.
um, it almost seems like you're getting used to the change a little bit more. Um,
Oh, well, I mean, that's a change for you, right? A few weeks ago, I think you were feeling a bit overwhelmed by all of it. So you now,
yeah, I think I mentioned a little bit last week. I'm starting to say, well, look, I'm getting used to the change and sort of having to
yeah.
adopt to new things. It this the one of the problems with that sort of the methodologies, the stuff around it, the skills you need to use. Do I use that tool? Do I use that tool? How do I approach these things? Some of it's common across all of them. Some of them are quite there's quite a lot of difference, and you just so there's certainly a lot of change, but I think I've got to the stage now where it is what it is, and you're going to waste some money.
Mm.
And I think actually, remember, I think really early on, John, I talked about you got to get used to throwing the stuff away. Try it and throw your
Yeah.
code away. Um,
Yeah.
this is probably an extension of that, where we're going to use it and learn some stuff and do something a particular way, and then be able to throw those learnings away because there's a better way tomorrow. So yeah, so
I don't know. I
got to come
still,
to terms with that as well. Mm.
man, I'm still not 100% on board with that idea. Um, you know, like, yeah, we're learning stuff, but oh man, some of my hard-earned, prompted code I feel attached to. I don't want to throw it away, and I worry about the stochasticity of, sure, if I improve my prompt to prompt it again, but will I get like what will I, what if it introduces some other problem that um
Yeah,
that I
look,
have to deal with?
John, I totally hear you on that. And one of the things I've actually been playing around with more on the whiteboard over there than doing is trying to look at building this stuff a lot more modularly. I mean, the example I
Mm,
showed you last week, showed the visitors last week with their my AST project, which is 65,000 odd lines of code now, and it's super complex, all done in Replit
yeah,
too. So
yeah,
um, what I've been thinking about more is how do we modularize this stuff? Break that whole application down and turn it into a whole bunch of semi-autonomous or almost completely autonomous pieces, so that when I vibe code this and that, rather than having to build these really big, more monolithic blocks of code, which is obviously harder for AI to understand what's going on, is to make a more modular approach to that. Um, so I've
I've
been,
got I've got two kind of opinions, maybe one opinion, just two different sides on this, and I think this is probably where we have to go, but it's so hard. It's so hard to do this. It's just the same problem with, like, you know modularizing is always a difficult thing to do, right? Like, it's not, even architecture and stuff.
mm,
But I think there's two ideas that are from the past that might be really valuable in the age of AI. The first one is microservices. And I know we all
uh,
kind of were excited about microservices and then we hated them, but, like, fundamentally, that idea of a microservice is it feels like the right size for an AI system. Like, if you can chunk your system into blocks that can be, done like that, then,
yeah, look,
that's good.
I agree. It's certainly a microservices concept. I mean, even if you look at MCPs, where you've got tool, 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 and this thing of tools that
Yeah,
other people are doing, and you're just saying, hey, these are the tools, and this is how I can use them, and connecting them through. And even, there probably needs to be some additional orchestration layers to turn tools off and on a little bit, so you don't have too many tools, because it's another way to
yeah,
confuse your AI. But that's pretty much similar thing. Oh, look, we want to do a summarizer, or we want to, text to speech piece, or we want to update some notes, or we want to be able to stick some stuff in a vector. Well, we just have um, basically MCPs or equivalents to be able to
Yeah.
do those functions. So do I need to code a way to add fields to a Postgres database or whatever? Not really. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, the biggest, I mean, we still have some reliability issues with MCPs generally because there's so many of them. Um, but I think we're starting to see some maturity in there. I've connected to a couple of new services in MCP management this week. And we're seeing a definite rise in MCP marketplaces, which are becoming interesting. Um,
Mm.
so
Yeah.
I think it's
Uh,
this thinking about how do you hang all this stuff together and reduce the friction to get from problem identification to a workable solution is not just throwing it at an AI and vibe coding it. It is, and this is probably the lesson. I'll allude to the lesson here. It's the architecture. You've got to
yeah.
really think about your architecture in advance, because AI is not necessarily, the vibe coding platforms we have at the moment are not great architects. So when you tell them to solve
Yeah.
a problem, they'll try and solve it, and it may be solvable, but it doesn't mean it was not the best way, and have not the best way to do it. So yeah,
Yeah.
challenging. But
Yeah.
yeah, look, I know this item too in the sort of the big noise, but it's still probably the space that you and I spend most of our AI time is is in trying to build applications in some shape or form. Mm,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and one last little piece of idea there is I think that functional programming is going to make well, I don't know if it's going to make a comeback because nobody was ever good at it, so the AIs aren't that good at it either. But the idea of like writing pieces of code that have some kind of compiler enforced guarantee that it can't affect other parts of your system, because whereas with JavaScript,
yeah,
you literally often can just do whatever the hell you want and it'll be okay until it's not. So I think, you know, appealing to those approaches to programming that actually strictly enforce lots of boundaries around the code, I think would be really,
just especially, I think there's a major other point here, a significant other point here, and the issue is that, and where people get really wrong about stuff on AI. AI is, and I use an old term, fuzzy logic. It's sort of this. AI has the power, and why we think it's so magical is because it can actually, we can spell shit wrong, and we can put stuff into it, and it'll work out sort of our intent, and we get results from it. Whereas in the old days, it was, you put a comma, you talk about code, you put a comma in the wrong place, it doesn't compile. Um, so we've got this really fuzzy, and what we have now is just in terms of our thinking, our solutions thinking, we really haven't got the situation where we've got, this is a deterministic 1 + 1 = 2, and this sort of more fuzzy approach, and we need to understand how these two things work better together and what's right for one thing another, because what we have at the moment is this sense that computers are computers and therefore they shouldn't be able to do maths and always come back with the same results, because that's what historically our expectations and objective was with computers. Now we've actually asked them to move into this, humanistic sort of, yeah, hey, can you give me a report on how successful the business was? And then it has to determine, what does you mean by a report? What do you mean by how successful the company was? And it then produces stuff, and you go back, well, that's not what I want. That doesn't right. So we have this massive brain gap in there of understanding the difference between a deterministic, factually outcome mathematical, and this more generic, lazy human approach to say, give us something interesting, give us something
Yeah.
we can work with, and going, oh, okay, we'll just guess all the, fill in all the gaps, and it really is back to that garbage in, garbage out. And we have to understand we've now got this garbage in filtering layer, and we're expecting it to actually allow us as humans to throw garbage in at them, and expect that they're going to actually magically fill in data that we didn't provide it, and that we're going to be happy with the outcomes. And when they weren't exactly what we were hoping for, even though we didn't know what we wanted in the first place, really, um, and they go, oh, anyway, that's an argument I'll probably talk on later as well. But I think
All right. All right. Good. Good.
it is super significant, because where its bits are super important, and that comes back to architecture. Do it this particular way instead of that way. We have to take responsibility for those things. And yes, we can vibe code our way through chewing through a bunch of crud code to get us to the output. But unless we've actually done the work at the beginning, and you can use AI in that as well, to say how, what, where, why, and give it its guardrails. Use the OpenAI AI agent SDK. Don't just use this API. If we don't help them and determine some of those things, then we're going to get fuzzy outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, John, unless you got something to add, we can move on to the
Let's
next
move on
one.
next one.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. Look, this is a weird one. I definitely reported this week around workforce shifting, where jobs are actually changing, and
Yeah.
some people are reporting there's lots of change. Jobs are changing, roles are changing, jobs are being lost, jobs are being added, and certainly I can find news stories on. As we touched on a little bit last week as well, news stories where that's definitely happening, and others saying it's not happening. But yeah, definitely a couple of stories in this week with Meta and Duolingo replacing contract workers with AI content creators, etc. So I think this is more about, yes, this is like almost a story about this is what's happening. It's just at what speed, where it is,
Yeah.
what are the change management issues when it comes to HR and all those things. Those things don't happen
Well,
immediately.
probably the weirdest thing about this change that is a bit unlike other times in history, right? Like, when you had I guess, the factory workers, and then they get replaced by a steam-powered machine, and that kept happening in various things where, like, some high capital-intensive thing would displace labor, and then the workforce would have to shift around that. Um, One thing that was about that is that you, as a worker, you couldn't afford to own a steam machine, right? Like, you couldn't actually, the company had to buy it to replace you or whatever. You couldn't also have one, right? But now the AI is so cheap that the people getting replaced can afford to have this steam powered machine. So I don't know, maybe like the dynamics are different, right? I'm still optimistic that, because even if, like, you're, let's say you're not a highly skilled person, but maybe you have a basic ability to write, like you can use a keyboard and you can think, and you can articulate what you want, which are sort of basic things that people, generally have unless they're extremely disabled. Then you can interact with a chatbot, right? And so, like, I don't know. Sure, they get replaced by AI, but they can also get an AI, and they have the capability to use the AI, to have the funds to be able to afford an AI, and
Uh,
they can maybe go and do something they want.
yeah, look, I tend to agree with that thinking a lot. I think the reality is that what we talk about productivity or production is productivity and production of what? Your third TV, new cooking pots, new glassware, or more entertainment, or more social feeds, or more content to read, or more little tools to do, or things to discover, or puzzles to play. So much of that has not got anything to do with the necessities lives of shelter, food, etc. So much of the things we actually produce that other people are prepared to pay for is we're so far away from the production now getting enough food produced to feed the people we have on the planet. That's I mean, I'm not saying that's everyone's got equal access to it in all parts of the world in the kind, in the way that we would like, but it's not a global production issue. It's not a productivity issue. I think though this will change, there's going to be a whole raft of stuff that people want and were prepared to buy, some of which will be linked to production of food and physical products that people want to buy. But I think there's a massive growth in, new ways to learn how to play music, new entertainment, new art, new social engagements. Um, New AIs are going to support people in terms of just being less lonely, and whole range of ways that this opens it up. So I don't think it's a one plus, one plus and one minus, or even 10. They talk about 10x improvements. Um, so yeah, that was one of the things. We'll have, if we have time today or sometime, John, we'll talk about my findings in productivity and my skepticism of how we measure those at a governmental level, because
Yeah.
it's really when you dig down, it's really weird, and it's not like I would think in business to say, oh, we can just do more with less. It's not quite that simple. So anyway, so yeah, look, job shift is still happening. I mean, some people are claiming that's not happening quick enough, or it's all bullshit. Others are saying it is really happening. We're in transition. Next 5 years are going to be significant social change, and that doesn't happen at the pace that technology we got a new version of this, a new version of that. Even those things are incremental. Mostly, we got to have another 5% improvement in its math scores or something like that.
Yeah.
So this isn't, as much as we say this is going to happen quick. It's a if it happens if we get some new stability within 5 to 6 years, I think we've been doing well. So,
Yeah. Agreed.
wow,
Agreed. Next
numbers
item.
matter. ChatGPT, 800 million weekly active users in under 18 months.
800 million
active users. 800 million active users weekly.
weekly.
Mm-hmm.
Weekly.
That's weekly.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Mm.
That is. I mean, I don't know. What are the numbers for the dominant apps? Like how big is Facebook, right? Like how many weekly active users does
I
Facebook?
haven't watched that number for ages. I suppose it's because I hardly ever go on Facebook. I mean,
Yeah, or Twitter or like
yeah,
Instagram.
I've started getting on Twitter. I started going back to Twitter a little bit more, just because there's a lot of times the news that's coming out of the announcements are still going to Twitter out of tech. So if you want to follow people that are, the CEO of company X or Y, or and you're interested in what they're doing, whether it's Mid-Journey or whatever, I'm finding X as being really useful. I've also grabbed X's AI, and you can get a Twitter if you pay for their Twitter account. So I'm paying for Twitter now, so I figure I better use it. So
Yeah.
just so I can track X's AI stuff as well. But I must admit, I don't use X as much as so I've got way too many. I've got way too many foundation models.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah. So the numbers matter. 90% of those are outside of the US, though. That's interesting as well.
mm.
And I think this
Well,
is really kind of interesting. I mean, India is like tripling down on AI. So they're definitely more at the application layer. How do we make it work for our society, which is really interesting. So I think that would be a significant portion of that, because the main companies, the enterprises outside of the US, the businesses outside of the US, not as up to date, not as adopting it as quickly as the US. But I think, talking before about anyone, more people can afford it. It's simple to afford, and doing some innovative stuff. I think there's a lot of what I would call small business entrepreneurs that are doubling down in terms of, hey, I can change here. I can see a way for me to make money and maybe even hark back to that COVID time. Hey, I could do this and not have to go to work. I can work from home.
Yeah.
I can have some
Yeah.
flexibility, and still be able to do some interesting stuff here. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, you just did see, speaking of Facebook though, Facebook, where they spend a few $1 billion on buying, what was the name of the
Oh,
company? They bought an AI company this week. Scale AI, I
oh
think it's
yeah.
called. Yeah, Scale AI.
Yeah. But
I don't know. I don't know
but
much about
weirdly,
them.
they bought. I just everybody on. I was watching Twitter X, and everybody was saying that they bought 49% of the company, so they didn't actually buy it. They just bought a massive minority stake in it. Um, so yeah, I did. I hadn't really heard of them either, so I'm surprised at. But then again, in this space, man, people just keep buying random shit for billions of dollars, and you just go, okay,
Yeah, 4 point. I
why?
mean, but I think that there was some crossover with some positions where this guy, what's his 20s? This guy, the 4.5 billion they spent or something like that for 49%. But this 27-year-old CEO is founders done pretty well. Um,
Yeah,
but
wow,
they're just talking about this, relevancy of these sorts of purchases, just to try and keep Facebook on the table. And I suppose the other one that's interesting is stuff with Apple. I mean, Apple. We had Apple Story this week, who a year ago were talking about some significant AI improvements and Siri Mach 2, 3, 4, or 5, whatever it
yeah,
is. And I have to say, everything I went through in terms of the Apple announcements was pretty mediocre, and particularly in the AI space. A couple of little tiny things, but Jesus, way, 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 way less than what they were promising a year ago. Um,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, they really didn't really go much at all into AI. It was always interesting because for a long time Apple didn't even talk about AI, and then they came out with that Apple Intelligence. Like they're going to rename the acronym to be Apple Intelligence now, and
uh,
I mean that didn't really catch on, and then they just didn't really do anything with it. Um,
Yeah, I suppose
so
they saw that as a pitch to owning AI, but
yeah,
that didn't work for them. I think the problem with it is that, and maybe it's a manifestation we talked about earlier. Um, what's the bits that's going to stick? I think we still don't know what sticks, and there's a lot of um, stuff we've got to throw on the wall and
yeah,
see what really hangs around. And Apple's become quite conservative. They have taken to heart this thing is, we know more about what people want than what the people want know themselves. And I don't think they're in a position to make that call at the moment. They don't feel confident enough to say, we know what this means for you, and this is the UX, UI logic, application that is going to actually make a difference in your lives. And we're not listening to you. You should be listening to us. And they're a long way short of that. Mm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they've always been a bit like that, but they were always kind of right. So maybe they don't. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
here I am. My we for viewers, we tried to run this call, and then just as we hit record, my Windows computer just blue screened of death on me. So here I am on my backup Mac, um, you know, with my iPhone. So they like made some good stuff, but yeah, I do wonder if um,
Well, they've
I
they've
mean,
they've
like, 'cause-
they've made some good stuff, and they've invested hugely. I think we talked about the other week. It's $55 billion a year in capital investment into China to deal with production and maintain enormous margins. So they're a huge cash cow. The problem with that is that once you get into that position where you've got a particular revenue stream, it's like Google's in a similar position, but probably not as much so. It's really hard to make radical changes. You've got to go, oh well,
yeah,
we've got to protect the cash flow we've got now. We're not going to disrupt ourselves. And this is with the newspapers and everyone else is, the encumbrance
yeah,
get absolutely thrashed. Even though the board's saying, oh, we've got to make this move, but next year,
yeah,
we're making
yeah,
too much money. Oops, sorry, too late. You've gone.
yeah,
Um, I do
yeah,
think that. Google seems to have their shit together on this though. I think that they were maybe a little late, but they had been investing and they knew this was coming.
Yeah,
They're a little bit in the same boat that they don't want to lose all their ad revenue, but they are. It looks like at this stage that they're not going. I don't think they're going to majorly suffer. They're going to be a major player coming out the other side. But then again, it might be X
yeah.
as well. You never know.
Well, maybe we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Well, who knows? Who knows?
No
Who
question.
knows how?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so that's all that AI to consumer stuff. I think that's definitely an interesting
Yeah.
play. So the three players I think are probably in there are going to be Google, X, and ChatGPT, or Chat, OpenAI, that are going to try and get that
Mm,
consumer. And Anthropic and those ones are probably going to be more wholesale, vertical developer, maybe create, some creatives, that sort of stuff.
yeah. 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 Well, we'll see. I mean, they all want to own everything, and they keep buying everything. So we don't know. We don't know. It's pretty exciting. I have to admit. I
Man, that's one thing I didn't.
oh
Oh,
man,
sorry.
I'm sad. I'm sort of sad I didn't. I mean, try and I was playing with GPT-2 ages ago, and I just like years and years ago when it came out, we made a little art installation in Perth. So they had this thing called I think it's not Fringe. Is it Fringe?
Yeah,
Fringe
Fringe. Yeah,
Festival.
yeah.
Yeah, and we had our kind of machine learning group, and we put on a little AI generated bookstore museum thing in one of the festivals, and you could go there and we all use ChatGPT, use GPT-2 to generate books that were
Hmm.
kind of nonsense at the time because it had this quality of like it felt like words, but there was actually no meaning. Unlike obviously today where
That's kind of
there's
cool.
meaning, but it's like
Mm.
yeah, and so it had this big thing. I remember taking a few of my favorite statistics textbooks and trying to generate a GPT version of it. And we had this robot that would actually it would do a what was it? It would do like a rap battle with you. So you would talk to it, and then it would like use a very basic text to speech, voice to text, and then it would use a GPT-2 to try and generate a rap song based on what you had said, and then you could get into a rap battle with it where you could then say another rap line, and it would you know, um,
Man, we were just doing
and
back in those days. I was using a lot of the machine learning stuff on Azure from Microsoft, doing things like
yeah,
because we're doing things like proof of life, detecting if people are smiling, can they move their head, eye movement tracking, and a bunch of stuff. Because I was
yeah,
doing things in compliance, and we were even doing
mm,
things like we did some really sentiment stuff as well. So we record um, like a conversation through the thing to try and get an identity from the face and from the things they were typing, um, whether they were enjoying the experience or not and stuff. But it was really good. Some of the things we used, they will work. Excuse me.
bless you.
Mm.
Yeah, but well, bless you.
Sorry. Good golly molly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold, I think.
uh,
Okay. Look, other one that's interesting, and I think probably the stuff that we should still keep an eye on is not just the pure here's a generalized chat. We're seeing some really interesting stuff happening with video production. Midjourney's released a video production. There's a bunch of new models out in that space, but excuse me, sorry.
bless you.
Um, the other one that's really working, probably not getting the same sort of publicities, but it's the stuff that's in medical, which we are talking about deterministic. We are finding that there's solutions that people haven't thought of, and really new work. I mean, there's and this is going to where we see breakthroughs, not just in diagnostic stuff where cancer detection is easier with AI, but even new drugs, etc. So I think that we can. Excuse me. Oof.
Oh no.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
might have to get you to talk for
yeah.
a bit, mate.
All right, no worries. Yeah, yeah, cancer and new drugs and stuff. Yeah, yeah. I, I'm not an expert in that space, but it'd be good to see.
Yep.
Although, someone was saying, I think it was at a coffee shop, and they were saying, don't want AI to just rapidly make cancer or like drug treatments like too quickly, you know, because one of the things is obviously, we have this whole system of trials and drug effects because human bodies are complicated, and you need to. It takes time to assess whether a drug is going to be safe, especially over years, right? So
Yeah.
I think certainly inventing new drugs is a really good idea, and we should do that. But we should, you know,
Yeah, look, I think the issue here is about finding new ways to get together and the potential of it being successful. I think we will see models that
yeah,
will allow us to do more modeling about potential side effects based on more and more data points around what it's causing this, which has this positive in this area but has a negative in that area. But
yeah,
I don't see us rapidly changing our FDA approval processes and the blind tests and all of that stuff, which is the human dynamics. But
yeah,
what I would hope that we'd get to is a position where when we get to human trials, we've been able to do enough artificial AI type
yeah,
modeling in advance, so that even those people that are exposed early, um, they go in at least wide open with what the potential is, and I think we can reduce the
yeah,
risks in trials,
yeah,
which would be
yeah.
which I think would be awesome.
Great,
But it's not just
very good.
in that drugs area. There's continuous ability to look at continuous monitoring. Um, I know Samsung is now releasing their sleep apnea sensor analysis stuff, which is these are all model. I mean, whether you call machine learning models AI, whatever, these are statistical analyses of sensors saying I measure this, and as a consequence of this, it's very likely that this is there. So it's not necessarily cause and effect, but there's strong correlation between the thing I'm measuring to something, to some other consequence. And this is the way in sleep apnea. So, which I think I think it's an enormous opportunity for us to people to have a watch that tells you, hey, look, you are experiencing this level of sleep apnea. Not that that necessarily gets you to an end result to fix it, but it does mean that it's more accessible to be able to say, oh,
Yeah.
it's not just snoring. There is more medical, and sleep apnea leads
Mm,
to heart health and a bunch of other things as well. So, mm.
yeah. No, that's good. That's very good.
So
Um,
yeah, look, I think we need to keep an eye on that. I look, obviously, I have been working for the last few years in what I would call semi-diagnostic and medical models for, being able to get make it much easier and cheaper and more portable for people to measure more of their health statistics. So fat
yeah,
distribution, whole, heart rates, and give indications of, basically helping us with early warning um, stuff. And I think that's that's a huge promise for us, as well. So we shouldn't just think it's about being able to write better emails. So, mm.
yeah, yeah. No,
um, uh, I suppose one of the things, a lot of stuff in the news this week around problems we can't ignore in the energy and ethics, which are sort of the negative side of this stuff as well. So bias, privacy, where human oversight fits into the models. Um, Also, massive energy. Obviously, these data centers are chewing up enormous amounts of energy. So I know that they're going to, in theory, help us solve energy production issues as well. But that is definitely going to be the trade-off.
yeah. I mean, I know it's a big thing. I don't think it's that big a deal. I mean, it is. I mean, they do use huge energy, so it's obviously yes. But like, we need to, when it comes to climate change and when it comes to energy, people want to go. They go, oh, I don't want to use, like, I think I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, oh, I don't want to use ChatGPT because it uses too much energy. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. Like, every human in a first world country is using large amounts of energy and resources and generating lots of CO2 just by existing and just
Mm.
all of the things that you do. And you should, like, yes, it's like noble to want to reduce your impact on the environment, but it's foolish to think that by like abstaining from a chatbot that you will have like made a significant contribution to reducing global climate change.
Yeah, no,
That
yeah,
is like,
no, I totally agree.
you know,
Because I mean,
and so I think,
yeah, I think probably here is a leverage as well. I'll use ChatGPT to do some research and do some stuff and help me present stuff. Okay, I use some compute to do that, but I did it in 10 minutes. Or do I
yeah,
spend 2 days doing the same thing, computing, using up power, consuming food and driving around for that period? And when the
yeah,
outcome is the same, so I say, well, okay, I might have had a peak use for those 10 minutes, but effectively the end result was I didn't actually, maybe at a lower level over a longer period of time. So yeah, look, it's interesting. We have to solve the energy issue. I mean, the reality is energy has to become significantly cheaper than what it is now, and we're not going to do it just purely by saying the sustainable, wind, solar stuff that we've got at the moment is adequate to replace what we have. So we need smarter batteries, we need smarter grids. Um, we need distributed production of energy, as well as we need centralized versions. We have to deal with energy. The biggest problem is not even with data centers. The biggest problem is heavy industry, because there
yeah,
is no sustainable alternative. If you I can't remember the number, but above 200 Celsius or whatever, 260 Celsius, if your production facility requires you to get that amount of heat into your production facility, we don't have a way to do that through a sustainable process at the moment. And it's not just
yeah.
economics; it's just we can't do it. It
I think
requires
it's
a
about
molecule.
I think it's about 1200 degrees Celsius. I think.
Yeah, I don't.
There's I did all.
I guessed the number on that one. I was
Yeah, yeah,
literally
yeah,
read a paper on it a couple of days ago, and I didn't really
yeah.
pay attention to the
There's a
actual
really great
physical
book.
numbers.
Um, I think there's a really great book is like something like How the World Really Works or something like that, and it just
Mm,
talks about all of these. It's from the perspective of climate change actually, and it's saying we have to solve climate change because we are using too much of everything. How can we do that? And it just says you've got to look at all the industries that we need and depend upon and their impacts on the environment. And yeah, and like one of the big things that we like, people like living in buildings. That's pretty cool. Like like to have houses, and and roads, and a lot of them are made out of concrete or something similar. And in order to make concrete, you tend to have to not only get something to like over 1200 degrees Celsius, but you also have to add this chemical clinker. I think you add it to your sand mix, and the actual chemical reaction generates CO2. And so not only do you
oh,
need
that's interesting.
CO2 to
I thought
make the
I
heat,
actually. Sorry,
yeah.
John. I should say. I always thought cement was one of those areas where you could actually store CO carbon. Yeah.
Well, so there are some people
Yeah.
working on trying to figure out ways to reduce the overall like there was one guy I was chatting with who was um, he was trying to look at how do you take like the tailings from a coal plant, like all of their ash and stuff, the burnt coal bits, and mix that in to make a new cement, and
Hmm.
then you'll have kind of you're
Yeah.
taking I think it's potash maybe. But I think there's some work in that space. It's starting to be promising, but it's still really hard. And that's just one of the areas where it's not just the energy, like creating energy certainly creates CO2, but chemical processes that we rely upon for
Well,
generally like having a nice life also make CO2. So it's and every bit of CO2 counts towards climate change. So it's all it's
John, one
hard.
thing I thought was, in fact, I saw the other day that in Australia's targets, we're traveling okay for our, was it 35? Is it 35 numbers for carbon reduction? But the vast majority, and I'm talking like I can't remember, it's like 90% of it has to do with land clearing. So
Yeah.
because there's been a reforestation role, so putting plants back in the ground. So we're moved from clearing areas to actually reforesting. That in itself has meant that we were, has been largely responsible for all our gains in our carbon numbers.
Yeah.
Whether that's sustainable, whether the reality of it, because I've heard some stories that some of the stuff is, we're putting back trees into land that really doesn't sustain those trees, and a lot of those are going to die in the not too far down the track because they're not in the right climate conditions for those trees to actually be a carbon sink for long periods.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
And yet we will come.
yeah,
Yeah.
I see the
Anyway,
carbon.
this is an AI podcast, not a
Yeah,
climate
that's
change
true.
podcast.
But look,
So,
it is certainly there. I mean, it's all this misinformation and bits and pieces, or we only get part of it. And it's coming back to that human condition and AI condition, where you can you can bring a point of view to an AI conversation and only get some of the facts. You don't always get what is perceived to be as the real facts or the real truth, whatever the hell that is.
yeah.
Anyway. Probably the just last one in here, which then we can move on from the big noise. Look, yeah, basically bit of internationalization, no question. US has been the major investor and probably the groundbreaking economies around this AI, and they certainly want to maintain it. The numbers there were quite staggering. I think over the last 12 or 18 months, it was 160 odd billion dollars in the US, and China number two at sort of literally 10% investment in dollars. I know dollars doesn't necessarily always mean you're going to outcome the same thing, but there's definitely a global play in this with the Mistral guys. They released European French guys. They released their first thinking model this week as well. So
Oh, okay.
um, that was definitely interesting. So others are trying to see it as a sovereignty issue, um, and certainly the U.S. companies are also ramping up their relationships with other places. You see that OpenAI partnered with the UAE, which we talked about last week, for
Mm.
global storage infrastructure, global Stargate infrastructure deployment, not just in the US. So definitely some interesting noise, and obviously China's still a major player. But
Yeah.
ho hum, up your bum, Australia doing sweet FA. So um,
Yeah.
we have a
Yeah.
product,
We
dude. John, look, we have this productivity talk fest coming up. Is
yeah.
anyone realistically looking at how AI plays a role in productivity, either positive or negative, at this talk fest?
I mean, the thing is, of course, we will talk about it. It's a talk fest, and AI is like
Uh,
we love talking about it. But will they will they implement meaningful policies around it? I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty skeptical. Um,
there's the big initiative here has been this, that we have the potential, a once in a generational change, which is some of the strategic thinkers behind um, government strategy in the Labor Party, about turning us into a green energy powerhouse, like on the Saudi Arabia of the next 100 years, and we're producing solar and wind at such abundance, and therefore we can, at such a cheap rate, we can produce green steel and all of that stuff, green hydrogen, blah blah blah, to drive the economy, and productivity and etc. Look, grand schemes, but we don't really see the international deals being done to sort of see this as if it's really geographically and economically viable to do that in Australia, then we have to have the balls to take it like a project like the wall in you know
yeah, the
or
line. Yeah.
these projects which are saying these are, hey, we're going to do so much more by doing some really groundbreaking. We need a moonshot. When's the last time, what was the, you know hydroelectric in New South Wales is probably the biggest infrastructure thing we've done in the last 30, 40 years. Where's anything that resembles anything like a structural moonshot
Look,
in this country? Nothing.
did we do it? Would the NBN count? Is that you reckon?
And
Would
you
the
and
NBN count?
no, seriously, that's been a complete f up. I mean, they're eventually
It
getting to
was
what they should
okay.
have done in the first place. They say, "Oh,
Yeah,
we got to do something." Look, it's challenging. We're a big geographically diverse country, and those things are definitely challenging. Um, but seriously, there needs to be
yeah.
some balls to the wall stuff to change
No,
some things.
if we could get green steel, it'd be pretty sick because we already have, like we'd just be stepping up a supply chain. But I don't know, man. The problem with solar is that although the sun shines a lot here in Australia, it also shines in other places.
Yeah, agreed.
Um,
Well,
you know,
this is the modeling that needs to be done, John. Though, because there's some people go, "Oh, we got lots of sun," and there's, it's almost this American arrogance of, we're a democracy and the rest of the world isn't. We think we've got sun and a few things, then we think the rest of the world doesn't. Yes, we may have an edge, but
because
then you have to look at the negatives. We're here. Make some steel. We still got to ship it. If you're making
still gotta
steel,
ship it.
if we're making steel and it's being used in a manufacturing facility down the road, I've got to move it from, here to here to here instead of here to,
Mm,
that that
yeah,
makes a big difference. And often it's
yeah. I
moving
mean,
moving dirt may be inefficient in some regards, but it's also from a handling perspective, it's pretty simple. Hmm.
it's just a bulk material. You just stick
Yeah,
it in a bucket and or a
yeah,
train. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, it's tricky. There's lots of things. Um, yeah, just from sunshine's plenty of other places. If we make steel, yeah, we're really far away. We, yeah, like, yeah, we ideally, if we could become a country that, like, if we like an AI thing would be perfect for us because we can ship that,
yeah,
instantly over the internet. Maybe there's a bit of latency, but it's nothing like the time it takes to ship a piece of metal over a boat. Um,
yeah. Look, there's no
but
point. Yeah,
yeah,
100%, man. I think to do the problem we have with upstream production. I mean, we're blessed because we've got a lot of natural resources. The problem is, as soon as you start putting any manufacturing in it, having a strong enough domestic economy to support the capital infrastructure required to do those sorts of upstream processing, whatever they are, it becomes super challenging. And
yeah,
and the biggest advantage China has these days, besides the fact of the amount of capital that's been invested in it, they've got these factories that are doing all these different interdependent things near each other. It's almost
mm,
a company in itself. So it's vertically integrated company in itself. So get the raw material over there, and then effectively they're shipping goods out the other end. Now, if we take the raw materials and make it to steel, then we've got to supply it in there. If there's logistics of bringing something which is higher in the food chain up to where the rest of the factory is, logistics becomes super challenging. So I agree with you. We have to think about things that we can actually manufacture all the way through. Now, if we've got, data centers, it might be quite feasible to have decent sized data centers if we can get cheap um, power here. So, if we really can create green, cheap power, I would much prefer to see that we were doing stuff which is digital, that we can ship
yeah,
cheaply, rather than trying to build part of a car.
yeah, yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could
Yeah, we could wax
easily become a
polygonal.
data center with
Yeah,
a solid government. Like, government's usually pretty stable,
yeah.
pretty
There's
confident. We
definitely
have
stability
reasonably good
issues.
internet. Yeah,
Multiple pathways out of here, east, west, north,
yeah,
connections. So, you know,
Yeah, if we could just make our energy cheap enough, you'd probably start attracting people.
To
But
be honest, that's a policy. That's almost a policy infrastructure decision. We should just say we produce core stuff, and energy is one of them. I mean, we got shitloads of natural gas, we've got shitloads of coal, we've got shitloads of sun, shitloads of wind, et cetera, et cetera. So we just got to double down on that. And I'm not suggesting that that means that we shouldn't be producing energy as close to the consumption as possible as well. But if you could do that work it intelligently with battery and smarter grids, and also if we were doing anything, focusing on the ability to deliver a production facility where energy can be delivered at a level in some shape or form, whether it's solar, etc., that's transferred into green hydrogen, which can then be used in heavy industry. Then you start looking at how that fits into the scenario. So we maybe become a hydrogen exporter, but a green hydrogen production exporter. Anyway, we're way off topic now, man. But
yeah, yeah, no, we are.
some of the
All
other
right,
things we're dealing with, so they become important to where we're otherwise talking about. Yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
another big noise week in AI. Don't expect it to be any
yeah.
different next week as
Next
well.
week, yeah.
So we'll see what happens from here.
All right,
So let's move on to our next segment, shall we, John? Unless there's anything else you
let's
want to
do it.
wrap up.
The emperor
No,
has no
I'm happy. Let's
clothes,
go.
and it's
Uh,
time we
Oh, I'm
admit
happy.
it. When
okay.
Google's own CEO has to invent the term artificial jagged intelligence to explain why their
Sorry, John. Didn't mean to go straight into that. So
All right.
meant to introduce it before we went in. So we've got a new little segment here. They were going to sort of have a bit of an opinion piece and maybe a little bit of a discussion between John and I. We might actually decide to take different sides of the coin as which they think they can offer. So I wanted to. There's a bit more noise between is AI massively overhyped or is it really something that's going to be meaningful and deliberate? So I've got I've trialing something here where I did a little bit of an AI voice to present a particular point of view, and I thought then John and I can have a bit of a discussion as to whether we agree or disagree with the
All right.
opinion that's being stated. So hopefully over the coming episodes, we'll be introducing a little few more of these audio visual representations, and often we're using AI, etc., to make that happen. So we'll listen to the opinion, and then we can open it to the team.
the emperor has no
Okay.
clothes, and it's time we admit it. When Google's own CEO has to invent the term artificial jagged intelligence to explain why their AI excels at complex tasks but fails at basic counting, we've reached peak absurdity. The numbers don't lie. Google reports a measly 10% productivity increase from AI adoption, while startups continue promising 10x improvements that simply don't exist. We're witnessing the blockchain bubble all over again. Flashy marketing, breathless media coverage, and AI washing by companies desperate to justify their valuations. The promised job displacement hasn't materialized. Most industries see little measurable benefit, and AGI remains as elusive as ever despite the constant hype about imminent breakthroughs. The tech industry has mastered the art of selling dreams while delivering disappointment. Until AI can reliably perform basic tasks without the unpredictable failures that plague current systems, maybe we should focus on solving real problems instead of chasing Silicon Valley fantasies.
Hmm. So there we go.
All right.
That's an opinion. Whether we agree, strongly disagree, etc.
Oh, I love playing the devil's advocate. But I also have personal opinions on this. What do you want to do? Why don't you pick a side? I'll fight the other side.
Well, look,
Um,
I actually like arguing from the position that I don't necessarily agree with. Um,
we
so
both want to do the same thing.
so you want to?
All right.
I'm happy to argue that they're right or wrong. No, wrong, but I'm probably would lean to try and stretch my brain cells to support an opinion which I probably don't agree with totally. That's my inclination. What about you? What you want to argue
I
that
mean,
that's true?
I
You
was
want to do?
arguing the same. I was like, I don't
Oh,
really agree with the
okay,
position, but
okay.
it'd be fun to argue.
You can take the positive. You take the positive. I'll take the negative that it is
All
really
right,
different.
okay,
I'll let
hit
you.
it.
You okay? If you're going to take that position, you're welcome to it. Um,
All right.
and you can be as deluded as you like, John. But so tell me why that presentation by my friendly AI narrator thinks that he's actually not very good.
Yeah. Well, so um, I feel like firstly it sort of a few things it sort of made some bold claims that are just kind of barbs that aren't quite factual. Like the idea of the jagged information boundary was not invented by Google's CEO. That is a thing in research people have talked about. Um, you know, and it is also funny that he argues that a 10% productivity improvement is measly when in modern industrial big heavy industries, 10% improvement of something, like if you got 10% interest on your on $1 million, that's $100,000. That's actually pretty good. So and also the sort of arguing that we haven't yet seen all of the job layoffs and the materialized change. I mean, arguably these things just take time, and we are seeing change and we are feeling change, and people are changing their behaviors in response to these things. So I think the change is real. In particular, it's funny, I see lots of people now posting, just generating their things on social media, and if they didn't think it was worthwhile, why would they be literally having their face, next to a thing generated from this AI for the purpose of like productivity in terms of trying to get more sales, right? So they're trying to improve their business's profitability directly through the use of AI. So yeah, I think that you know that the future is still, the hype is real, that we are likely to experience continued gains from AI. And maybe to take the almost diluted side of it would be, we are starting to see the emergence of 10x engineers. You know, the ability for people to create programs, skilled programmers being able to make things that they weren't able to make in a short time before, and being able to experiment things that they weren't able to make in a short time. This is evidence that something has changed. It's no longer just a toy. Like, people are able to do things they weren't able to do before. It's like a bicycle. Like, you can just go faster than you can if you just walk or run. So that's it. I think they're wrong. Over to you, Kev.
Man, look, I actually think that. What side am I arguing again? It's so confusing, man. No, look, I do think I do definitely think it's a bubble. I think that there's no question that we have an ingrained position in tech where we always seem to over promise and under deliver, and often what does happen from it is that the things which we didn't promise get delivered, which make it worthwhile. I've been saying since I've been in this industry since the 80s that it's if you took things in practical terms, technology and computers should probably have never succeeded, because every time we tell them that this is going to happen or it's going to cost $5 million to do this, by the time they spent $5 million, we say, oh, you've got to upgrade it, it's another six. So we're always missing the mark continuously, and if we had an employee which was as unpredictable and promised to actually get the job done, by Friday, forever and ever and ever and ever. And we spent more and more money and made it harder and harder for management to manage the tech outcomes and the productivities and their ultimately their bottom line. Tech has failed and continually overpromised, whether it's blockchain, even the internet. I mean, the internet was the biggest bubble. Not saying that there wasn't value in it, but all the promises we made around the internet and what we made around blockchain, they all failed. They, literally billions of dollars back then and even went down the toilet. Now, was the internet ultimately something that's valuable? And I think blockchain's potentially even worse. I mean, we've got a solution primarily still trying to find a problem that it's currently fixing. I think that AI might be a little different. I think that the hype is significantly higher than anything else we've had before, and it's going to change the world. And everyone's done. It's bigger than it's bigger than the internet. It's bigger than the industrial revolution. So there's no question there is massive amounts of hype in this. Massive. Now, does it mean it's not useful? No, I'm not saying it's useless. It's actually going to be really useful. But we are absolutely in a situation where we're over-promising and under-delivering. As much as there's continuous, I say, I've argued all the time about, this has changed, hard to keep up. This has to do with lots of incremental changes. I can now do video. It's now gone from 5 seconds to 15 seconds. Are they important? Yeah, they are. But it's not monumental yet. And I think that neither the companies involved, when they're really honest to themselves, I don't think they really believe themselves 70% of what they're saying. They believe that ultimately it's going to happen, but to say this is going to happen by next year, or this AGI is going to come here when we haven't even defined what the hell it is meaning that we've got a lot of people, including taxi drivers and everyone else now, saying, AI, and now the problem with that is it's like the old adage, if your taxi driver starts to give you tips for the share market, chances are it's time to sell.
Yeah.
So I think we're, there's certainly some of that position we're in now. Now, why is that important? From my perspective, is I believe that AI is fundamentally going to change society. I think fundamentally is going to do it, but it's not going to deliver the benefits in the way, in the shape, or the time frame that's mostly being promised. And I understand why they're doing it. I mean, everyone wants to go from argue, and they say, it's like climate change. The world's going to end if we go up 2 degrees, and everyone's going to die, and people are starving, and it's already killing millions of people every year. I'm not saying it's not a problem. It's a problem. Same thing with this AI. We're saying it's going to change the world in months, maybe the next 2 years, and the world's going to be completely different than it was before. I think the time frame is way short, and I think that job loss is not so much jobs being replaced and suddenly massive productivity because they're saying, I don't need a social media manager now. I can get an AI agent to do all that for me. The issue is that we will find there will be just as many new jobs and new things to do to manage these AI processes and make the right decisions and control them, and as we're replacing, as we see, I think, I can't remember which, they got rid of 2,000 coders, and
Yeah, Microsoft, I think.
yeah, and it was it. Oh my God, was it? Anyway, and then literally within a few weeks, they'd employed more than 2,000 additional people to help them with implementation of AI. So they had a net gain of staff. Now,
Yeah.
look, I think we're the same situation we've had with other things, probably more so that we've had Instagram influencers and content producers on YouTube. Those jobs didn't exist 10 years ago. There weren't people. Now you look at one of the most common things for someone in primary school to want to be when they grow up is to be a content producer on YouTube or an Instagram thing. They don't want to be astronauts. So the issue I have is that, yes, it's certainly overhyped, and what they're promising is bullshit, to be honest. But they're doing it because it's an argument they think people will understand. The reality is there will be lots of disruption, and the fundamentals is, I think, the fundamental core issue here Absalom, which I talked about previously, was a difference between fuzzy logic. AI is this almost layer between how humans work with computers, which allows us to be lazier. And we can
Yeah.
give this generalization, and we've now got these AIs that are going to actually work with the computers that are deterministic to come back and give us really, the real core answers. And that's a massive transition of the way we work. Um, so, yeah. So I still
I
think
had
if it's not overhyped, it's overhyped because it's telling us we're going to get yellow and we're actually going to get blue.
yeah. So you made an interesting point. This isn't a rebuttal. It's just like a question that your comments raised, which is okay. So if kids these days aspire to be YouTubers, let's roll forward 5 years, right? And now AI generated content's everywhere. What are the kids then gonna aspire to be?
Well,
Oh, oh,
that actually is one of the most important questions I think we've ever discussed on the show, John. The most important, because the reality is no one knows. No one's got a clue. The reality is, and I don't think they did 5 years before it became content producers.
yeah,
But I think it's even more so now. What are the really sexy roles? The ones that are look from at least from the outside, to being the ones that are having the most fun, that have got the most
yeah,
prestige. What are they going to look like? Are they going to be AI scientists? No, absolutely not. They're not going to be. There's going to be
yeah,
guys, geeks in the back area that are working on improvements in models to do X and Y, and they're not going to be the ones with they might be making big bucks, but those big bucks are not going to be publicly seen.
yeah, probably obvious, yeah,
I think, to be honest with you, my guess, and I'm absolutely just guessing, um, I think we'll see a massive rise in self-employment and entrepreneurialism. I think we'll
mm,
find that when the means of production of so many things that people want, not the things they need, but so many things that people want, are so low, it means that lots and lots more people can actually become manufacturers or managers of something. Now, I don't care what it is. I'm not saying what it is. It might be a little tool. It might be an insight. It might be whatever. Mini movies that we don't watch. Movies like we do now. Most movies are 10-minute shorts that are some derivative of
yeah,
derivative of YouTube. I don't know. Maybe they're more applications that'll create a version of the movie that suits the viewer, and everyone is getting a unique experience. Don't know. But
yeah,
the thing we're talking about there is the barrier for a 14-year-old to get some sort of education, which that's another thing that's going to change, to then being able to do stuff that matters and make decisions. I think that's going to be the thing that people are going to be cool. Hey, I know how to run my own little business. Um,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
means we need a society where the vast majority of people are contractors or are businesses. And I don't mean contractors in the
Yeah,
sense that you're just getting piecework, but I do think it's interesting that Fiverr and those sorts of platforms, I'd like to see and track where they're going. And that's actually on my to-do list for next week, is
yeah,
to look at all of the artworks and Fivers and seeing how they're thinking about AI in a contractor world. Because I think that is probably the strongest indicator I have of where I think things are going. And
yeah,
that's where kids, and it's not that it's not there. How many kids grow up today and say, "Hey, I want to be a game designer." Now we're saying, "Well, I don't have
yeah,
to go out and get a job to become a game designer. I can go out and
mhm,
I can go and build my own games, and yeah, I
yeah,
can go and do this stuff, and I can do it." So, because I mean, okay, one of the other drivers we have seen, some of the numbers that matter, the cost of making digital stuff
Yeah.
in my lifetime has gone from being, hundreds, millions of dollars to produce sophisticated websites or online apps and games to,
Mm.
so many things now cost that would have cost me $500,000, so now costing 500,000, or sorry,
Yeah.
$5,000.
Mm.
And I think that number is going to continue to shrink.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying there
Yeah.
won't be interesting and longer stuff to do, but so long-winded story, John, as usual. But it's in that. If
Yeah.
I was going to guess, it's in that sort of space. So, teach them
Yeah.
entrepreneurialism, self-sufficiency. We need a government environment that supports that initiative. And if we're talking about universal wages, I think the universal wage should actually be still the education, supporting young people to learn and supporting them to become productive. And that productive isn't necessarily as a job, it's maybe learning the skills to be productive and go back to almost in the old days there weren't businesses with lots of employees. There were lots of businesses: the cobbler, the baker, the
Yeah.
farmer, and I think we're just
Yeah.
going to see I personally think we're just going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And the size of to be a big business, you don't need to manage enormous numbers of people. That's as interesting as well.
Yeah. Yeah. To be important, you don't need people as much anymore.
You're still going to
Yeah.
need people. You're still going to be able to communicate, but managing large groups of people. I saw a presentation by the team from Y Combinator, and they were talking about the 20 something and how important the 20 something person now becomes. The problem with it in the past has been what's in the way of a 20 something, early 20s guy building a big company. And one of the major
Mm.
ones was credibility. The other major one is managing extremely large teams. So
Yeah.
a 20 early 20s can manage up to maybe 15, 20, maybe 30 people effectively. But managing teams larger than that takes a lot longer to learn that process. So you
Yeah.
end up with these startup companies having to bring in an older CEO or someone to be able to drive that growth, whether you Google or whatever. They've all done it,
Mm.
or most of them done it, or they've taken a long time to learn that, and they've really started to did it,
Yeah.
made it, lost it, did it, type stuff a few times.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but with AI, that becomes much more feasible, a new environment which makes that more happen. So anyway,
Yeah. But yeah.
I think we agree to agree, really. But I thought
Yeah.
probably the other interesting point I'd hear point of view on this is I'm still surprised to see the number of people who are so skeptical, because in doing this, I actually looked out and saw a number of people that are starting to go, this is all bullshit. It's all going to end in tears. It's not quite an NFT, but
Yeah.
certainly it's in the blockchain internet,
Yeah.
coming up with
Yeah.
graphs, trying to duplicate the old graph that's going to hype, and then crash down, and then slow
Yeah.
slow burn.
No.
So instead of this being, a 5 year, they're talking about, this is a 25-year, 30-year before we see any real benefit out of this, because it's the second time that this stuff will actually work. But
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I just the problem with that argument is I already see tangible benefit. Like genuinely,
mm,
genuinely can do things I couldn't do 3 months ago. So that's probably a good segue into the things we're up to. Actually, maybe we should go to the next section on the couch.
sure. On the couch. Where
On
did
the
I?
couch.
I don't understand where my title's gone. No, don't have on the couch.
It's back. It's back somehow.
Oh,
It's
there
back.
it
Hang
came.
on a sec.
Yeah, okay. I didn't open it and leave it.
No, it was gone. It was definitely gone at the start,
Yeah,
and now it's back.
yep,
But anyway.
no problems, man. So what have you been up to?
Yeah.
I've had a fairly narrow focus week. So normally I'm probably a bit more scattergun across a bunch of things. But so what have you been doing?
Yeah. So for me, I guess two things I want to talk about is my VR robot control app that I built. So that was interesting. It's probably been the biggest thing that I've tried to make with just purely AI in a with a library that I didn't really know anything about. The VR library, I was just I had an example that we built on. I managed to get to a pretty terrible place though with vibe coding. Like I wasn't able to add the features and things weren't working. Um, and I actually switched to this last week. I decided to just do a refactor. I was like, no, I'm just going to do a refactor. Stop trying to add the features that I want. Let's like pull it back. It had made this one massive, probably 3,000, 4,000 line JavaScript file with all of the stuff. And I was like, I don't understand this anymore. Like, I kind of understand it, but and I'm like, I tried to actually ask the AI to do the refactor for me, and it ran away, and then it didn't work. And I'm like, oh god. And so I ended up rolling back because I was in agent mode with VS Code Copilot for most of this project. Yeah, but I ended up rolling back to ask mode, and I literally was like, okay, I went to ask mode. I said, I want to refactor just this piece, just this piece out, and I want it to be in this thing. I want to have this stuff. Can you do it? And then it showed me the thing, and then go, okay, yes, I will accept that. So I slowed it right down in my refactor, but did get the benefit of actually understanding what was going on. And so after I'd refactored all the bits out to about my 3,000 line, went into about 300-ish files. I have opinions about code, so I want you to refactor this so it makes a bit more sense, or it's a bit less verbose or whatever. So a bit of a shortening of code, but more files. I then was able to go back, and there was this one thing that was bugging me was I was trying to show the data from my depth camera inside the VR environment, and it made sense that I'd be able to, but it just wasn't working. And I ended up figuring out how to debug and discovered that the AI was choosing to decode the data as a binary blob, but it was actually it was like a binary string.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. I had to just choose the right decoder to deserialize the data, and when I did that, it all worked. But I guess my point is, I was only able to do that level of debug by forcing a refactor to get the code to be places where I could understand each piece separately, and then I could go in and do the refactor. I'm still happy to switch back onto agent mode, but I feel like there's this point, at least in my workflow now, where I think this is maybe what I'm going to do going forward is you have your plan. Oh, I did still have the plan, like my PRD, like do this stages 1 to 6. And I was trying to refer to that to say, hey, here's the plan. We're up to step 5. We haven't completed step 5. You need to do this. And that was still helpful. But I think my workflow now for the next big project is going to be definitely make a PRD because that was helpful. I'm going to, vibe code the start of it to get the bits, and then I'm probably going to keep vibe coding until it starts getting too big. Then I'm going to stop agent mode. I'm going to just use the AI to help me refactor, but with the ask mode instead, so it doesn't automatically do any edits. And then probably save that using Git, obviously, to save my things, so I can and then switch on agent mode again.
You get using your branches and merging, even though you're the only one.
I tend not to get. I guess I could be branching actually. I don't really. I mean, I'm a big fan of that workflow. I often do it, but I never really thought about it in this case. I was just using it as my own basic checkpoint, but I definitely could.
I've started playing with that a little bit with this week.
Yeah.
And also, I'll chat about it next week. I've got a new one. I just put it on the wait list to watch, which is much more Get integrated. So you put all your tickets and use the Get ticketing system.
Yeah.
And it will actually use that and scope it. And it's this platform is because I started investigating. Similar story to you. Last week was awesome. I did a lot of stuff in Replit, and I was like blown away at how far I got. And I then moved because I've been really the primary thing I'm doing with this platform is to be able to create AIs on the fly, which have particular attitudes, tones of voice, and they reach out and they are the interviewer. They're collecting the person who's the user of this is being asked to contribute data to achieve some sort of goal, whether it's an entertainment goal, whether it's a scope of work, whether it's a problem identification, but it's sort of that sort of mode of being able to create it. And got it working quite well on sort of what I call text only, a voice interaction, but it was very very linear. I would talk, let it go, process, blah blah blah. It would then read it back to me, very very slow. Did a little bit better, improved it, but again, still that process was, those interactions were taking sort of 10, 15 seconds in some cases to run through those steps. And I'm not talking about the talking stage. I'm just saying gaps of between maybe 10. So I moved into doing.
Oh yeah, that'd be terrible. Actually, no one's going to wait 10 seconds for it.
Yeah, no, it was too much. No, I went through a refactoring exercise, and this is where I stuffed up big time. So I actually did a lot where I went and said, looked at into things, looked at the best practice for this, and had it do a scope of work, and I did little PRDs, epics for each of these best practice elements, and then I had, and this is all done in Replit. So I then had Replit write these markdown documents, including checklists. So separated them tasks. I phased it all. So there was, here's an epic. There was all the phases of that epic. Put in things and how to run it. The problem with it is it did that work. Where I stuffed up is that I didn't sit back and look at the architecturing of it. So I did stuff with parallel process, did some parallel stuff. I had introduced some caching in the process. Yes, I got some gains, but I've fundamentally gone the wrong way. And even though I then said, no, you really need to do this, and told it a little bit, bits and pieces, it had formed its own opinions and kept going back to the same process. So I eventually got angry and had to I basically was trying to do too much again in one screen. You can go this mode and that mode. And I said, leave all that, let's do this. And I went back and I did the work that I should have done in the first place. And I went out and made sure that I properly researched the best way to achieve the goal I was trying to achieve. Because I said, here, it's doing this way. I just want it quicker. Can you improve it? Yes, it did. But I needed to move from this mode to a fully conversational mode, which there was other methods where this happens at the top level, and I've got it down to sub 1 second response times, so half a second response times. But the big listen here was just similar to you, regardless of what tool you're using, whether it's Cursor or some other newfangled thing, because the AIs are based on statistics. This is the way other people have done stuff. If you're trying to do stuff that's even towards the front pointy into stuff, you better. I mean, you can use it now to help you, but read the documentations. Don't just sort of say, "Here's the documentations for Rust." You got to be really specific. So you got to put your own guardrails on this stuff. Otherwise, it goes real bad. So I had effectively 2 days of just absolute pain and misery. In fact, so much that I finally cracked it. I think it was like 6:30 or something on Wednesday, and I finally got it all working using the proper methods. But it got to the stage I said, no, I'm not working on this tomorrow. I just couldn't face going back. I said, okay, I worked out. I've now got some other problems, which I thought there were. The other problem is that I've now got an issue where I'm trying to keep state, a fairly complicated state process in terms of the interview, how far they've gone, what's answered, what not answered during a conversational dialogue. So I'm having to build parallel background processes to convert the audio to text and the text to do the assessment and then continue to check it up. So it's trying to work with those things here. So I thought there'd be some research and examples, and I would just be going, oh, okay, you need to do this. And guess what? Like you said, I was Wile E. Coyote and found myself sitting out there. And there are some people obviously working on it. There's some papers I've seen on it, but there's nothing on GitHub. There's nothing in any of the documentation. I think that there's people like Sesame, the one we played with last week.
Yeah, yeah,
They're starting
yeah.
to think about it, but these guys have got literally tens of millions of dollars behind them just to do this one thing. And I went, oops, I just went a step too far. I think I can still crack it.
Yeah,
I
that's it.
think I can still get it done because I actually have quite a little cleverish way to do this.
I mean, that's it though. You got to remember that we are on the edge, even though we're trying to like stay just a little bit beyond the edge so we don't fall off the edge. But like and that edge is jagged, as the Google CEO says, right? Like, so you don't know where you're just gonna like, oh, these 2 points, I'll just go between them, and actually, that's
a great big
drop.
crevice.
Yeah.
Yes, that was pretty much, probably a fair bit of work. I played around with a few new things. I played a little bit with Agent Zero, which
Oh, yeah.
it's a pretty exciting process. Is pretty exciting. I'm still trying to find where it fits into my use case. I'm getting a little frustrated with my Claude account as well because I'm using a bit and I'm using it with tools, but I'm hitting rate limits fairly quickly. So,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, you've had enough of this one, or this conversation's gone on, boom, and just hitting a line. I've been playing a lot more with, as for this Ast, I started working a lot more in voice. So hence the
Yeah.
little piece of text we had in our presentation
Yeah.
earlier, and doing text to voice. So I've been playing with different voice tools. I've installed a thing called Chatterbox, which is on my system. So I'm trying to run that locally for doing TTS
Nice.
as well. So yeah, there's just so much, man. So many different ways to cut it. So interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. You said earlier though, man. You showed Replit to someone who was pretty excited, but you're finding you're
Oh,
using VS Code yourself.
yeah. Oh, well, because the problem with me in robotics is robots are real and they generally tend to be
Or are
connected to my
they?
actual computer. And so as much as Replit is really great, like I need the because for my system, right? The system is I have a whole robots software stack called Robotic Operating System
Yep.
that I turn on, and that's the driver for my robot arm, and then
Yep.
that has some web endpoints, and then I can run a web server. But that web server, because of cross-site request sharing stuff, really wants to be the same IP address as itself. So that web server really should run on the same computer that's got the ROS stuff running. And then my VR headset was connecting to that web server to get the VR experience, and also connecting to the WebSocket that my robot system was making, so it could get all the telemetry and all the
Have
data.
you?
And I can't do that with Replit because it's on the cloud.
No, you can.
Oh, all right, okay.
Okay, I've done two things. I've tested this already, but
Yeah.
I've done this way. You can use one of the ones I do in the first instance. I was using, particularly in the earlier days, I was using this a lot. I would use SSH you can actually put an SSH hook into Replit from Cursor or VS Code. And that would
Okay.
allow you, because I was then doing some of the coding inside Replit in their cloud. This is connected to the cloud function. And then, so I was actually saying, oh, I've got a bug. And then I would actually go into Claude, because the problem with Replit is it was good, but when it had problems, it gets itself in these loops. So, using
Yeah.
Cursor as another, and the problem is it's 25 cents, 25 cents, 25 cents. I've spent like $150, $150 US this week on it, and probably similar last week. So it does mark up there. But I keep telling myself, shit, if I paid someone to write 65,000 lines of code, that wasn't going to cost me 200. It wasn't going to cost me $200, $300. So
it still feels a bit painful though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, especially seeing as I don't have any revenue coming from this project yet. So, but the other one then I did as well is I've had, because you can replicate goes obviously to get, then you just do a clone, do a clone back to your thing, and you can update it around there. So it means you can actually round robin it through there as well. Um,
Mm.
so,
Yeah, 'cause
and you can,
I,
the other
I
thing,
have.
and the other thing which I haven't done is there was this thing where you could actually go replit SSH initially, got it to a state, then do a clone version which you update, and then when you basically do this passback, so you then actually have replit. If you want to use replit again to do some stuff, so say maybe you want to get some information, attach some information pages, and you want to use replit for it or whatever for some
Yeah.
reason, you can actually just get a open a new project in replit and point it at the get repository that you've updated
Yeah.
from cursor. So
Yeah. I mean,
my Replit's got same project. I've got like this in Replit. I've got boom, boom. I've got maybe 4 or 5 versions of the same project
versions of.
inside Replit
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's a good way to do
with
it
different get
because
with
I did
different gets.
find like the Replit agent is way better than the VS Code agent. Oh my god. Even VS Code using Claude for um, is not as good as Replit using Claude for. It's just I do know Replit is kind of worth the money in a way. Although on the topic of money, I was because I'm a tight ass. I noticed the assistant version for 5 cents,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. I
so
use that a bit.
you can,
Yeah,
and I
it's
haven't really not sure what's the difference. Like to me, they seem reasonably the same. Just one's 20% the
no,
price. So
they're not.
no,
They're not the same. Assistant is really good if you want. It's got a smaller context window. So if you say very
okay,
clearly, I need you to work on these files, and this is an advantage as well. The advantage with Assistant is Assistant will do a very much more focused task, update these, make these
mm.
changes, and doesn't go, oh, well, we could also, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
do this in
yeah,
3D, and go,
yeah.
I certainly find that with Agent, there are times I'm going, pause, stop, do not do.
Yeah,
You can
stop.
say straight away, go boom. Oh, no, 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 that's not what I said. But then
Oh,
again, then I'll read
I
the example.
actually, I,
Hmm.
I actually let one through as well. I saw it happening. I'm like, oh, I'll let that through. And then later on, I had to. It was just like, I was just watching the agent go, and it was like, I'm having a compiler issue. I know. I'm going to set it so that the timestamp for everything is 0 because that will definitely fix my compiler issue. And
Yes.
I saw that and I'm like, I mean, that's a bad idea, but maybe I'll let you go. And then, of course, I had to go through and fix the 7 places that had initialized it with 0.
Well, I had similar.
Because obviously,
I
yeah,
had a similar issue. I wanted to use the OpenAI agent SDK for
yeah,
this voice interaction because the agent has much more agentic integration rather than the standard API integration, right? And it's a
yeah,
simpler process.
yeah.
And I had this other routine in there, which was actually doing it recognized when if someone was speaking, not a noise, so it does voice recognition code. And it kept coming up with an issue because the agent SDK has that function built in built into the process. And we had it, and every time it was having issues, it was going, oh, it's causing errors on the thing because they're in conflict with each other, and it kept blaming the SDK. So it kept
Ah,
taking the as oh well it would say things like the SDK is obviously not it's got some bugs in it. I'll get this working by getting rid of it. I
yes.
said no, the task was to fucking to add it, and I kept finding lazy ways. And I was going, stop being so lazy. you know you're just finding the slack ass way to make it actually compile because your objective at the moment was to fix a
Yeah.
compile error. And I'm going, no, you can't just sort of comment a whole bunch of code so it compiles. That's not an acceptable goal. Jesus. I mean, it used to do that, honest to God, it used to do that sort of thing a lot more than it does now. So it has
Yeah.
definitely improved. But there's no question with the size of the code bases and how they are thinking. And this is the other thing So when I talk about what the roles are going forward, understanding not just the functional implementation. It's like maths, understanding what's happening underneath rather than just being able to remember a formula and executing a formula. There's a fundamental difference between those things and
Yeah.
how this formula relates to
Yeah.
that formula. Same thing here. Understanding, okay, why is it doing that? So if you know why, you can actually readjust how you engage. If you just say, it's
Yeah.
not doing what it's supposed to do, um,
Yeah. Yeah. It'll just get in these loops.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but there's a few other tools. I've been playing with a couple of different tools now, both from the security check within Replit, and I'm using another one in Cursor, which is it's. I haven't paid for it yet. I've done a couple of free trials. um, I've got lots of email addresses.
You
The
do.
that's how I justify email addresses. I could play with things and go, oh, that's run out. Oh, now use that one. Literally. Um, and it actually does a lot of error checking on your compile stage. It'll come up and give you a report. It's not cheap. It's sort of 30 bucks a month to use it.
Yeah.
But you can run it in VS Code. I can't remember what it's called. Rabbit something.
Okay.
And it actually goes through and looks at all those and actually will give you some recommendations. And I do think that this is another area we're going to get some specialist AIs which are going to be trained more on what are the errors that AI generally makes.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
now you've done the code, you've vibed it. Okay. Here's my AI, which is really good at taking a Replit Vite application and finding the problems in terms of efficiency, security,
Yeah.
compilation, type definition, da 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 da, and too much, streamlining the code, streamlining the routes, etc. And it'll be focused squarely on those things, and those things will become a business, and then they'll not become a business because the replets of the world will just encompass all of that learning into their own system as well. So, so yeah, so it's an interesting. I am sitting very squarely, absolutely very squarely, and I have to because of this Ask project. There are things I'm wanting to do that I can't, that I'm not quite there, and I'm relying on two things. Some of them I can figure out and find a solution, not necessarily the most elegant one, but I'm also really relying on the fact, as has been said by the foundation guys several times, is it may not be quite there now, but if you're building a business which is only dependent on the foundation model's current behavior, you're probably too late. So you should be building systems which are built on the expectations that the foundation models will improve. Which did you see? Other thing we didn't notice, I noticed that ChatGPT had an announcement yesterday, and few of their models have been effectively halved in price as well. So,
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
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 So
Pretty
we're
good.
getting more and getting costs. So,
Yeah. It's happening.
yeah, look, and I think the competition that's happening in this space is great to see, and I think that's going to continue. So,
Yeah.
I suppose that's my week. I've been playing a lot more. Other thing I probably want to announce. I've been playing around with my own personal, a little bit the Caven thing, but also looking at
Yeah.
content and some.
Yeah.
I'm looking at leaning into some curmudgery. So
People don't usually want to be called a curmudgeon, but I mean,
well, I'm actually going to launch my own personal thing on my own YouTube channel today called
yeah, cool.
Rambling from the Rocking Chair, and I've
Nice.
decided to try and to make it productive as much as how much I like to talk. I'm trying to come up with some ways that I can produce some content around there, which I have an opinion, get it done and out the door with as little friction as possible. Enough
Yeah.
oversight, but not trying to, because no one wants to be honest, people really don't want to hear me ramble on and look at my ugly face for 10 minutes at a time. So I'd prefer to see if I can come up with some other methods to be able to take that write an article, create a
Yeah.
voice, and lean into that as a communicative pathway. Not saying I won't do some, talking head type stuff as well, but if I want to try and get stuff where I might post even daily or even multiple times a day, I need to be able to do
Yeah.
those really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And I need
It is
to
hard work.
control my Yeah, I'm really trying to invest in trying to work out the methods. I've written even little things where I've built this. I don't know if I showed it to you before. Talked about it earlier, where I have a sound file and I've built this little animation thing that builds pretty picture animations and stuff that changes and things during the recording. So you're mainly just producing
Yeah.
writing something, editing it, turning it into a decent audio file, which I've been playing with Chatterbox and 11 Labs,
Yeah.
etc. Hume, I've just started playing with Hume as well. And then having some sort of visual engagement. I'm playing with a couple of ways, either converting that to a video with a bunch of here's some stock and here's some stuff, and how quickly I can turn it. A little bit like the Gemma one where they do a PowerPoint. Can we create a video that's along that sort of line, which is contextual? And I
Mm.
can maybe change out of, build a bit of a mood board of assets that relate to the stuff, and then have some specifics that relate to the content. So that's interesting. And I think that, to be honest with you, I think that, there's a lot of AI content being produced on YouTube at the moment as well. A bunch of it's just crap. I'm trying to figure out how we could do that so it's still valuable. It has the
Yeah.
person who invests their time to listen to it is
Gets
getting
it. Yeah.
value out of it, but also doing it in such a way that it's not so expensive to produce in
Yeah.
time and money that you have to find some way to get a recoup on it. And
Mm.
so interesting. That I'm still pushing forward with that one. That's going to be a little bit of a slow burn for me as well. Mm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking to the future, I may be organising a hackathon tomorrow, so that's going to be interesting. The So there's this the robot arm that I do a lot of my experiments on is this open source robot arm, and there's well, you've probably heard of Hugging Face, AI company Hugging Face.
Yeah, occasionally, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I tell that to some people, like, "Hey, what Hugging Face? Like, what are you talking about?"
It,
Like, okay, fine.
it
I
is
mean,
an AI. It is an AI geek hangout, really, to be honest.
yeah. Well, anyway, so they have invested a lot in a machine learning, like an AI based framework called Lee Robot that's open source, and then it comes along with this robot arm and it lets you do imitation learning and stuff. Anyway, they are having a global hackathon this weekend, and I've sort of put my hand up, like, yeah, I'll be interested in like organizing it. I wasn't very good at organizing it; couldn't find hardly anyone to actually host it. So I've tapped my mate Mesh on the shoulder to host it at his roastery. He's got a roastery out at Malaga, I think, or Morley.
So it's a
Anyway,
coffee roastery.
yeah, yeah, and anyway, it's just a big space, and gonna have it there. But I've had 4 people sign up, and I was emailing them, and one of them was like, "Well, I'm in Sydney doing exams." I'm like, "Well, you obviously can't come here to Perth if you're in Sydney." I got this only one guy on that list has been replying, so it might just be me and this other dude. And so as I was saying in the, just before the call, I was like, I'm kind of organizing a hackathon because if I organize a place, go there, but no one turns up, is it a hackathon? Well, there will be because there'll be other people doing hacking in like Sydney, Melbourne, LA, France, like Paris and stuff. All over, there's like 100 places who've signed up for it. So could be fun, or it could just be a big fizzle. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
I'm so tempted to come.
well, you can a lot. You
Yeah,
might
but the Eagles are playing this weekend.
well. You
Yeah,
come on the Sunday or something if there's anyone there. I'll find out tomorrow.
the game's on Sunday, so it'd be more likely a Saturday for me. I know nothing about
Um,
coding or doing anything for robotics though, but look, it's more than it's 24 hours away, nearly. I
yeah,
can
how
figure it
hard
out
can it be?
between. How hard can it be?
Yeah, you've got Replit to help you, right?
Yeah. Well, it might be interesting to see how it do. Is there any teams that are not teams that are local, or are they all just here? I'm the Paris team, and or are there anyone trying to do some
Um,
distributed stuff?
what? Yeah, I haven't seen anyone doing distributed. It's supposed to be a local hackathon,
Hmm.
but will anyone actually turn up? I don't know. I'll be there. Um,
So what's the do you see any
so
problem
far, there's no
sets?
real. They haven't given us problems. They've just sort of. I think they just want people to play with the robot arm and together. So, but it's a
So the idea.
reinforcement.
Oh, sorry.
It's a reinforcement learning thing. So what I'm thinking about is because it's a coffee roastery, there might be like random valves and handles. I might try and train a robot arm to turn a handle. I think that'd be cool if I could get that to work. Um, we'll see.
So
Um,
basically, you're going to code, and then they've got the arms in there that you're going to be able to post it for testing,
oh,
or
well, it's more like it's kind of just like we'll all just be. It
in the virtual.
It's a hackathon. I think it's more like a festival. It's like a bunch of people all around the world are going to be all doing the same sort of thing at the same time, and we'll all be like, "Yay, we're all together!" And I think we'll submit. If we make something, we'll submit it to the global list
Mm,
of cool things that got made that day. I don't think there's anything in terms of prizes announced.
no.
Maybe there's some swag for the best people, but I don't think we'll.
Yeah, Hugging
I'm
Face is
sure there
not.
were other people.
Yeah, and we should. I had planned to do that Bolt one this month, but didn't
Oh,
didn't end up doing it in the end. So I got the invite and stuff,
yeah,
but I haven't really been. I was really heavily into Bolt and the Bolt open source version as well early on. Um, but I yeah sort of went away from it. Thought, oh, this is a chance to relook at it. Um, but you just can't go. You just honestly you can't get good at enough at all of them. I did my little
mm,
windsurf try a few weeks back, and I canceled my cursor thing. And before cursor actually ran out, I decided to cancel windsurf and move back to cursor. Um, and
yeah,
then I saw Anthropic did made some comment. I haven't gone down. I don't know if you read it, but Anthropic has closed off or reduced access to
yes,
windsurf
windsurf.
to their
Yes,
models. Um,
yeah,
which
yeah. I saw that.
I mean, they Windsurf made a big song and dance about it, saying, "Oh, it's not going to be bad for us. Foundation models turning stuff off." But that being said, guys, you did sell to OpenAI, so what
Yeah,
did you think was going to happen?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
he,
yeah,
not really sure if that would. Okay, look, it probably happened earlier than I expected it to, but I'm not surprised it
yeah,
happened. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Especially, yeah,
So you got the hackathon. What about next week, man? Look, hey, mate, what do you? I know we haven't made a decision on it yet, but I think it'd be worthwhile for us to let people know we might have a third wheel coming in for a little bit next week. So I think we might have
yeah.
Paul Lucy
If
on
we,
board, which we'll have a bit more announcement about it next week. But Paul's got an interesting pedigree, a little bit different than the two of us, and
mm,
got some new initiatives that we're pretty interested in getting involved with. So if all the T's get crossed and the I's get dotted, we can probably tell a bit more of the story. But it'd be worth talking to Paul about um, his particular AI goals and aspirations, particularly in the
yeah,
basis that it's very much in that West Australian focus around the only thing we really do really well, which is use shovels, put them in dirt and buckets and ship it overseas. Um,
we are really good at it
yes,
though.
that is true. Um,
We are
so
really
yeah,
good.
we'll start to we'll have Paul on board and see how that fits in. But it'll probably, if all things being equal, be something we might do from time to time, and we might have a chat about what we're doing with Paul's initiative if it all comes together. So bit of a
Yeah,
teaser,
that'd be cool.
a little bit of a teaser.
Like it. All
Um,
right. I think that's a good place to end. Shall we end?
yeah,
We'll
I
see you
think
all
that
next week.
think that's about it. I'll let you go get ready for your pseudo hackathon.
Yeah, if it happens. Um,
Well, that's why it's pseudo. If look,
yeah,
worst case scenario, you can drink coffee and be the sole representative
yeah,
from West Australia. What's
yeah.
just before we
Personality
close?
hackathon.
Yeah, what's the community like in the robotic space for you here in WA? Is there?
I'm trying to grow it. It's pretty little. There's a few companies around. There's a few events, but it's pretty grassroots. You know, there's handful of companies, and we're all a bit isolated. I'd like us to get together more.
Yeah, look, John, I've been,
Yeah.
look, you know, I'm old as hell. You know, I helped write the Bible. Um, the 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 thing I've always been really, really disappointed with in Australia, but even more so in WA, the tech community is really not very good. Um, there are those, you know, stuff like Paul and I was involved with Unearthed and some of those projects, but they're fairly, yeah, they're almost social engagements and stuff rather than really what I see in the things. You go to Silicon Valley, and these guys from competing companies are catching up after work, going on, going out together on the weekends, going runs, having coffees together, sharing resources, sharing problems. There is a massive sense of community, that there is a brotherhood in those sort of places. We've
Yeah.
have since I can remember, we've had some of spectacular skills in the state that have done some amazing things, some of which have become international companies. I mean, everyone knows about Canva, which started here,
Yeah.
but there are literally a dozen more of those companies, including at one stage, Alta Vista was the largest search
Alta
engine
Vista.
in the world, and they started here.
What? Yeah.
Amongst others, and I've got a
Yeah.
list of them somewhere. Some of them, these guys were being funded and supported and built communities out of the west coast of the US, and hence they all left. You know, every one of
Mm.
them. Atlassian's probably one of, again, not, if Atlassian was from guys were from WA, we would never have seen them here again. They were gone. I mean, the fact that they're at least on the East Coast, which has got a bit more of a critical mass of community. I mean, I know companies here in Osborne Park, up here in Main Street, who were responsible for writing all of the code for the Xbox game controllers and building the Wi-Fi protocols and some of the most advanced
Yeah.
router technology and stuff. You know, here in Perth, and most people in Perth didn't even know they were West Australian companies. You know, they didn't. Their
Yeah.
website didn't say they were from WA. There was literally stuff all. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't know. I've battled it all my life, man, to try and get a sense of community. And I go from being super engaged in it to then disillusioned and say, stuff it, I'll just go and do my own thing, and then try it all over again.
I think that's my story. I did that with the Perth Machine Learning Group, and
Well, I'm
yeah,
still a
here I
founder.
am.
I'm one of the founding members of the Internet Association. I was involved with setting up way before your times, but we raised, Paul Keating had the Creative Nation statement, and it was about multimedia, probably before your time, man. And they took
Yeah.
there was a, what are they called, the university, there's initiatives that have been around for setting up these university industry centers. So you have to have unis involved and businesses involved as funding.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
was 5 of them launched for multimedia, because
Fuck.
and we I'm bastards. We managed to get $5 million out of the federal government to set one up here in Perth, in
Nice.
conjunction, and that took enormous amount of time. But did it build a community? No. Did the unis get most of the
Mm.
money? Yeah. Did there was a small number of commercialization, spent the $5 million supporting research in the unis, and that was about it. You know, so
Yep. That's how
I
it
don't.
usually goes.
I just don't know what it is, man. Why we?
Mm.
There is a sense of, we're more culturally, like, almost squirreling secrets. Oh, if I share information with someone else, they're just going to steal it.
Yeah, there's a big thing of that. Yeah, and I mean, you see it with the big companies how they play. They
Well,
you
yeah.
know.
Well, when we started Unearth, which we had a different name then, we met with all of the basically the big miners, Rios and BHPs, to get them involved at the
Mm.
very beginning. And the whole idea was to foster a startup community around mining and to set up
Yeah.
that process, right? and it really came down to Rio and BHP, and those guys didn't want to be engaged. If they're involved, we're not involved. I mean, we did
Yeah.
manage to get some stuff involved, but we were told flat out, "Oh, no, we're board, but you can't, you can't have us at the table if Rio's going to be there," type thing. And it wasn't just. I'm not talking about BHP. It was all basically all of them.
Yeah, they're all like that. They were all like that. Yeah, it's terrible.
And
And if you get a job at one of those companies and you basically are like not allowed to talk to any of your friends who might happen to have jobs at the other companies,
the reality is, guys, I just don't think there's enough IP for 90% of the jobs that are in mining. The IP, the stuff and the information leak from there is so minimal. It was like, what was it? This is a famous story. I mean, in fact, Paul worked there at was it Gold? What are they called?
Goldfields?
Yeah, Goldfields. I mean, back in we're going back. Was it in the 80s or 90s? Probably, I think it was the 90s. They did a thing where they end up put a bunch of their geodata on a bunch of CDs, and they basically just said, "Look, we need to know where to find the next X amount of gold. Here's all our geodata," and they offered a $500,000 prize for people who could find
So
more
cool.
gold from. So they opened it up, and there was a group out of the US and a group here in Australia who found, looked at the data, and they compared data from nickel mining and the gold mining, and they used different techniques. And the gold guys weren't really looking at the other stuff, and they were able to then ascertain that data. And I think that was one of the main things. But here you had someone CEO who had the balls to say, "Here's these millions of dollars worth of geo data. You want it, and you can help us do that? Here, take it, and help us find where the best place to get the next, 6,000 ounces of gold or whatever it was." And that worked. But that's so rare here, so flipping rare. Yeah,
it's very rare.
Anyway, mate.
All right. Well,
we digress. Cool. Enjoy your hackathon. I'll
Thanks. Enjoy your game.
Yeah, I can look who's playing. It's actually the reason I think is my sister-in-law just said to me before I came on, said, "Hey, they've got COVID. Hey, I've got some spare tickets. You want to go?" So I thought,
cool.
But I better ask my wife before I.
Well, there's always a backup hackathon if you get bored.
That's true. That's true. I know nothing about robotics, so I just like to go there and see what it's all about.
We'll see if you can get something going. All right.
Ciao, man.
We'll see you next week. See everybody.
We need a closing. We need a closing thing. That's what you can do.
We do. We need and subscribe and click the bell and
all those other all that other stuff. Yeah. Ciao.